Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Firaxis livestream. I'm Pete Murray, your host, joined today by Anton Strenger, gameplay designer for Sid Meier's Civilization VI Gathering Storm, and senior producer Dennis Shirk, who has been leading the Civ 6 charge since the dawn of time. Guys, thank you for coming on today. We're going to be talking about Phoenicia.
Yeah, Phoenicia.
Yay.
So, Dennis, Dido is back.
Yes, and first off, I want to say thank you for everybody who's showed up to watch. I know this is press preview day, so there's lots of stuff to read out there. So it's awesome that you stopped by to learn all about Dido and Phoenicia.
We have the latest build.
The latest build.
Hot on the edge.
Even newer. So you're going to see some good stuff today that you actually don't get to see in even the press stuff that they don't have. So that's cool. So Dido and Phoenicia, we're actually very excited to show off. We were talking earlier where I referred to her as the... I would say the Swiss Army knife of civilizations in terms of what you can do with her, the combinations you can put together to play effectively in almost any situation. And she actually showed up once before in the Civilization, but as Carthage in Civilization 5. And so now she's back properly as Phoenicia in Civ 6. But the cool thing is we actually have the same voice actress doing the voice for both, too.
Yeah.
We figured we found somebody who can actually speak effectively with that language, so why ruin something good?
There not being a huge call for people who speak ancient Canaanite these days. When you find somebody who's good, you go with them.
Yep.
Just in case you're wondering about finding Canaanite speakers at some point in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to jump into our game. Driving today, as usual, is Carl, servitor of Moloch. We're going to be playing on King difficulty today. So here we've got her abilities. This is Phoenicia was the original sea power. Right. So there's a lot of things here set up for them as a naval power.
Yeah. Like Dennis was saying, she's kind of a Swiss Army knife in terms of her bonuses. But you kind of have to, it's a little bit tricky to set it up right. And what we'll see in Carl's game is that he's done a lot of really smart strategic and sort of geopolitical plays early on to start settling on the coasts, getting a bunch of Chthons, spreading across multiple continents in order to stack these bonuses later in the game and have just like really lucrative trade routes and global presence on the map. So yeah, her Founder of Carthage ability lets her move her capital. It's a very unique mechanic in Civ 6 that we haven't had. The only other time this would happen is like if you got your original capital conquered, you'd get a secondary capital as a new one. But what she can do is she can actually move her original capital. So it's really cool. If you are under a really long siege, you might be able to sneak your original capital out in time. That's not usually viable in multiplayer because the project takes a while. But
you can totally do it while you're at war, though.
You can totally do it while you're at war. You can move your capital to somewhere that has a Chthon district. It also allows you to use bonuses in some really interesting ways that we'll see in Carl's game.
I actually prefer moving the capital when you, in a great situation with her is founding cities on a new shore, low utility issues, lots of other civilizations. Use that opportunity to move your capital because you've already got established cities, lots of loyalty where you were. Yeah. It's a great way to keep expanding.
Yeah, so have a beachhead on another continent to really like open up your new colonies, just like Phoenicia did in the ancient Mediterranean. So she also gets bonus trade routes from her government plaza district and more production towards the district and the buildings that go inside it. The Mediterranean colonies, writing technology boost, which represents the sort of like Phoenician alphabet, which is one of the earliest written and widespread sort of languages. It's sort of the, Phoenicia wasn't really an empire formally in the same sense that like Rome was. We were talking about this a bit earlier, Pete, but they sort of had a common culture and, language that sort of united them.
Yep. And the Byrame, an interesting thing about that is they were unquestionably at the time the best builders of boats in the Mediterranean, and they built them for anybody who had money. So the Persians, the Greeks, anybody who had coin, the Phoenicians would set you up, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
All right.
So here's our save here. Carl has been exploring our opening continent here. Here's the Byrame. This time we have built it for ourselves. It's got a really cool eye on the side of the ship there. And one of the bonuses of these guys is that trade routes within, I believe it's 4 tiles, can't get plundered, can't get pillaged. So it's really nice. You can have sort of like a network of coastal Byremes, exploring and protecting your cities, but also protecting lucrative naval trade routes.
Right.
What is that silly round-shaped harbor I see?
The silly round-shaped harbor is the Cawthon district. So that's their unique harbor district. It gives bonus production towards settlers and towards naval units. And if you have a naval unit within that city's boundaries, they heal up in one turn, which is really useful. So Carl's done something really smart here where he's set up Tyre as basically the ultimate settler factory. So he's got the Cawthon, which is plus 50% production towards settlers. He has Magnus there, which will... with the promotion of provision, so the settlers don't cost population. And I think he's also got a social policy that's helping us out. Yes, he's got the plus 50% production towards settlers. So he's basically just cranking out settlers from Tyre. This is the early expansion phase of Phoenicia, which is really important to getting that later in the game. And the Ancestral Hall he's working on in that other city there will give us another 50% towards settlers once that's complete.
This is one of the setup things that Anton was mentioning early in the live stream when he's saying Phoenicia, if you get everything set up properly, is going to be so powerful, especially the speed at which Carl can now expand with that settler factory. It's all about the layering game mechanics with them.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of coastal cities already, but Carl's going to kind of move that settler up into the mountains because we have, very fittingly, the Ottomans and Rome kind of like are our neighbors. So, we've got the Roman capital not too far from us, and, there's Istanbul, not Constantinople. And so, historically, Phoenicia and Rome were great rivals. It's one of my favorite times of history, actually, with Hannibal and the Punic Wars and stuff. So, Rome is so far friendly with us this game, but certainly when I played this save, they were not so friendly later on. So we'll see what happens. Right now, they're sending us trade routes, which is great.
I noticed that a lot of the Roman territories are colored differently than they normally would be.
They are, yeah. So this is part of our jersey system. So Rome also normally has this sort of purple color by default when you play them. But because, we are a human player and we decided, hey, we're going to play Phoenicia, we sort of like trump that and we say, okay, well, we're going to play our player colors, and Rome switches to a sort of like alternate visitor jersey of color set. And it's fitting because one of the things that Phoenicia and their trade was really famous for was this dye that was really like one of the
Tyrian purple.
Tyrian purple, which is like the coolest, most hip thing to have if you were a noble in the ancient world, because had this really cool like deep blood purple color. It was used to dye like the robes of like Roman senators and aristocrats, and it kind of kept its color even after exposure to the sun. And all you had to do was like gather up 10,000 snails and poke them and squish them, and it was kind of gruesome and not very cost effective.
But a luxury good that everybody wanted and very effective for them.
Yeah.
So going back to the jersey system, Ed did say that that's going to be something that's available for multiplayer as well too. So you can choose if you like when you're playing multiplayer,
lobby,
you can choose one of the jersey colors for your thing.
Yeah. So we got the Cliffs of Dover down there in the tundra, which might make a good city spot, but it's not going to have super great yields. But having another coastal city is not a bad idea. We've got the Nazca city-state up there, but I think it's being besieged.
Yeah, somebody's unhappy with it, but that's okay. I mean, for us, we don't really. I mean, other than possibly pushing a little bit of religion, we don't need their unique improvement necessarily.
Right.
So we can maybe let that one go.
Yeah.
Now, for the audiophiles out there, one of the more interesting stories with this particular set of music, it's been playing off and on. You heard it during some of the warm up. Is Phoenicia's theme was actually created from one of the oldest known cuneiform tablets that was ever discovered. I think. I got to go to my notes, but it's called the Hymn to the Moon Goddess Nikal. But the cool story behind this is when our designers decided to create a theme for this, they actually went to this because it was such a great story. This is the only known complete piece of music, or I should say the earliest complete piece of music that they were able to actually identify as music. Right. It had lyrics paired with actual music. It wasn't written like the way modern music is. They had to actually kind of tear it down, imagine what everything is there. There's no sense of what the tone actually is, but they can get that there's a certain cadence to it. After discovering instruments, actually digging up instruments made of different like forged sizes of hammers and things like that, they were able to pair the two together and come up with what they think is actual Phoenician music. The people who have torn this apart have actually come up with a few different themes for what they think it is. They've got similarities to them, but they're various different pieces.
Right.
And what Jeff Knorr wrote this one, I believe.
This is Roland.
Roland did this one?
Yeah.
And what he did with this is he basically said, okay, here's a few different choices that I have, and obviously he chose the prettiest one to run with it. But I would encourage everybody, if they're curious, to actually look up this piece of music. It's called the Song Tablet. And it's interesting, too, because you can't help but use your imagination a little bit. The tablet's actually pretty small. When they were actually inscribing it, they'd go right around the side and straight around the back again.
Yep.
And on the one leading edge, they actually had like a category written. So when they put this away, no paper, so they had stones, it would just be put on this edge, categorized with everything else, and
there's the book,
on the
book
side.
binding, if you will.
Something like you'd expect your grandfather to tell you about. Well, at your age, we didn't have paper. We had to write the
We wrote the title of the books on our cuneiform tablets.
But
That's pretty funny.
Look that up. It's great. It's a really interesting piece to read about, and also just for the possibility of actually listening to the other pieces as they were interpreted.
I remember, so like during development, we often do these things called sprint reviews, where every month or so, like we sort of like have a couple weeks worth of work, like design, art, audio, engineering. We all get together and we kind of show off what we've done to the rest of the team and get on the same page. And like, so that's when we got to hear like Roland get up to the stage and say like, hey, like there's these different variations of this ancient Phoenician music, and here's the research we've done, and like here are the different variations. This is the one we chose, and this is why. And so hearing stuff like that's really cool.
Yeah.
And just having that collaborative process throughout development is really fun.
And this was one of the first civilizations that got fully implemented during development, which I remember the message went around to the whole team. Okay, everybody, Phoenicia's checked in. We've got a bunch of new rules. They're the first fully finished civ.
Yeah.
They were a little different than they are now, though.
Yeah, they actually went through a lot of design variations. So the moving of the capital district, or moving of the capital project, got changed a couple times. At first, it was basically when you built your government plaza district, it would automatically move your original capital to that city. So you could only do it once because you can only have one government plaza.
Right.
But we realized that like it wasn't very powerful, and it sort of was a disincentive to build the government plaza because you're like, well, I don't want to build it yet because maybe I'll want to move my capital later.
Right.
So we decided to end up like, okay, let's tie it to a repeatable project on the Cotham, the unique district, and let you do it as many times as you want, but it's kind of expensive, so you can't just do it at the drop of a hat. Another thing that changed a bit was the loyalty. So it originally was that any coastal city would be 100% loyal all the time.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And it was pretty
awesome.
nuts. It was crazy awesome.
Little
yeah.
OP.
So yeah, and like on some maps, I was like, okay, yeah, this is fine. But on other maps, like Inland Sea, which is very fitting for Phoenicia, is just like, oh, I own the coastlands, and it's never a problem for me. So we switched it to be this, okay, well, coastal cities, but only the ones on your own continent. And having that in combination with being able to move your capital to change what your home continent is, allows you to be really flexible. We'll see that in Carl's later save, kind of how he takes advantage of that. But for now, like our capital of Tyre is on this continent, and all of our coastal cities are totally locked in. So we've got some barbarian problems in our city, our desert city here. It would be nice. That'd be a nice Nazca line city, but that ship may have sailed.
Petra becomes a Petra city.
It could be a Petra city. Yeah.
Speaking of
Not
wonders,
the best I've seen, but yeah, Carl is working on it. Yeah, so we could do that.
speaking of wonders, this is a civ that you want the Venetian arsenal.
Oh,
for.
yeah.
Like,
Definitely.
for sure. Yeah, when it comes up, yeah.
Yeah, if you get Venetian Arsenal and that 50% bonus production towards naval units from the Cothon, it's pretty insane. So
He just upgraded with looks like he's constructing the lighthouse down there, and he actually saw the whole model update too, which is a nice look.
yeah, I love the way that, and we'll see it later, but the way that the district looks once it has all of its buildings in it.
Yeah.
It looks very unique. It's got that circular shape.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the easiest ones to identify. Even in the fog of war, it's easiest to come across. So, horses for iron. Yeah, don't give the Romans iron. That seems like a reasonable idea. So, there's a lot you can do early in the game with Phoenicia, but it mostly involves like not a specific gameplay approach. It's more about using their abilities to seize territory early on with the idea that you're going to expand into it later. And when we switch to our second save in a few minutes, you'll be able to see specifically all the space, and how Carl was able to use a lot of really clever tactics to kind of get Phoenicia across the world. I think they're particularly well suited for domination victory. I feel like I have a save going with them right now where I'm pushing for domination, and having pushed back some of my enemies pretty well, like there's no question I'm going to control the seas. It's just a matter of time before I start picking off those last few land capitals.
Yeah. I think, like they do have that sort of Swiss Army knife, Phoenician Army knife approach where you can kind of lean in a lot of different directions. Domination is definitely a good one. And especially if you kind of, end up having a presence on all sorts of different coastal continents all across the world, then, your army can sort of like get to the doorstep of your opponents much more easily. And, having control of the seas can help you facilitate that. Having a bunch of, strong, wide empire play, plus a lot of really good trade routes, can kind of set you up on just a good economic footing to kind of lean in whatever direction you want later on.
I'm trying to imagine what a Phoenician army life would actually look like in real life.
It looks like a regular one, but it's made out of stone.
Ah,
There you go.
I don't know. That's the one. The
It's
one
very
thing,
hard.
and there are no vowels. That's the other thing. The one thing because certainly Sweden is so strong at the diplomatic game, and Canada is so strong at the diplomatic game. I feel like in contrast, these guys are maybe not quite so set up for that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess theoretically speaking, if you're maintaining your suzerainty on people and you've got a good set of alliances going, there's no reason you couldn't be a contender for it.
Yeah, there's nothing that's specifically helping you as Phoenicia, but
Right.
yeah, like if you do play a more diplomatic play style, you go for those alliances, go for those city-states, and rack up a bunch of favor, then that could be good. One thing that's really good too is like if you have, if later on, if other players are getting hit by, for example, natural disasters and they're asking for aid requests,
Right.
one of the ways you can score up in those competitions is to send them gold. And again, like as Phoenicia, you can have a lot of gold if you have those trade routes going. So being able to kind of channel the gold into a diplomatic victory point or two here and there might give you that edge to win that victory type later on.
Well,
So-
as we churn towards our golden age here, maybe we should.
I want to give it maybe a couple
You want
more
to give it a
turns.
couple more turns?
Yeah,
Okay.
Rome looks like they're up to something.
I saw that too. They peeked some guys out of the fog. And
Yeah, they kind of like poked a legion out and tried to see what was going on. So
Oh, I
it'd be
missed that.
funny if they did declare war on Karl here. We wouldn't have to play out the war, but I kind of do want to see if it happens.
That's a nice spot for a city. Holy cow.
Nice natural canal city, yeah. So there's a bunch of new historic moments going on here. That one was basically if you build a tile improvement on a tile that got extra yield from a natural disaster. So there might have been a flood there earlier, or like a storm
Maybe
or something
storm
like that.
swept it, yeah.
And so going in and building a tile improvement, it's like, hey, you're taking advantage of this land that got wrecked, but is now more fertile. So holding off the barbarians, no problem.
So people have been watching the labels as they've come up over the map, and a lot of the rivers and the mountains that are in there are named after ones in the real world.
Yeah.
So I know Matt Beach went through and came up with gigantic lists.
Yeah.
And for you guys who are modders, those are just text files. You'll be able to append
For sure.
things to that. Although I'd be surprised if he missed anything particularly.
Yeah, I think we were pretty thorough, but yeah. And they are kind of like geographically linked as well. So if you're playing as Phoenicia, you're going to see more sort of names that are associated with Phoenician areas in the real world.
Correct.
And stuff like that, like names of mountains and rivers and stuff like that.
So somebody asked, what happens when the seas rise with Phoenicia?
Well, it could be a bad time. It depends. So when you're settling a city,
Yep.
you do get a lot of information about what are the potential natural disasters or man-made disasters that could happen here. So you will see when you're settling, there's a little wave icon. It's like,
Yeah.
and there's either a 1, a 2, or a 3.
Right.
And so as the sea levels rise in your game, first the 1s get hit, then the 2s get hit, and then the 3s get hit. And first they get flooded, and then they get submerged. So while you're settling, a coastal city, you could see that ahead of time. We didn't want players to have to do guesswork on that. So you will know, like, even though it's not really scientifically realistic for Phoenicia to know this in the ancient era, There's a flood that's going
That's
on
a
there.
pretty good flood. Yep.
That's a pretty good one. But you'll know, like, okay, later in the game, this is a potential danger flooding site. So you can choose. You can still have a lot of coastal city options and decide to opt out of that risk, or you could decide, hey, I'm going to settle there anyway, and I'll just have a flood barrier, have a coastal sea barrier to build to kind of like keep that at bay if it does happen.
That's something you can kind of keep an eye on. If you watch the CO2 panel, see how everybody else is playing the game.
Yeah.
If you see some aggressive CO2 levels rising that's kind of out of your control, then you might want to beeline for flood barriers just to be prepared.
Yeah.
Is Rome doing anything to us? Oh, here they come.
Okay, yeah, Rome's sending something towards us. And they also took Nazca city-state, and they don't have a lot of loyalty there.
Oh, there it is.
Here
Oh,
is.
there it goes.
Starting next to Rome, you kind of expect this 2-3 times. They can't help themselves.
Yeah, it's true.
At least early in the game, before you get to make friends. So basically, loading up the later save is just going to be a big Rome game at that point, right?
Well, Carthage must fall.
Yeah, Carthago Delinda Est or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carthago delenda est. All right.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, shall we jump into the future and see how things go?
Sure.
Yeah, let's hop into our time machine.
Yeah, we'll bring our
and,
Phoenician music down. And this is a good opportunity to talk about something that's going to be new for Civ 6.
Yeah, we'll do a drive-by feature preview here as Carl is stopping through the main menu, and take a look at a new multiplayer mode called Play by Cloud.
It's in the cloud.
But we're gonna have to wait for Carl because Carl prematurely loaded the second save. So we'll give it a second.
real quick, what is Play by Cloud?
Well, we had a previous multiplayer mode which was play by email.
Yeah.
It was a little bit more of a manual process. It was a little awkward, and we wanted to have a more integrated thing where we're not actually passing saves around. So we implemented a mode called Play by Cloud. So when you set it up, you can invite your friends. It sends a join code out. It's storing everything up on our servers, so the game is maintained no matter whose turn it is. And it notifies you when it's your turn. So it'll notify you through in-game. It'll notify you through if you've got the Steam app on your phone.
Yeah, it uses this sort of webhook thing, so you can kind of choose in the game options like, hey, I want to, be notified this way or that way or whatever.
And you can set up your own webhooks as well. You don't have to use just the Steam notifications. So those are all a thing. So we'll switch over to the screen here, and Carl will just kind of jump over to the Play by Cloud screen. Not the whole way, but just to show you in the options. So normally, if he was actually logged in and online, you'd have another option. It's just sitting there, and it just sets up like any other multiplayer game and has a join code, and you copy the join code out, send it to all your friends, off you go. Now, this is for somebody who likes a long game of Civilization, very, very long game. So if you don't have the time to devote to a regular multiplayer session, and you were like, you know what, I've only got 5 minutes before I go to work, log in, take your turn, fire and forget. It takes care of notifying the next person. So
it's very much like there are some folks here in the office that do chess matches online, and so they might have like 4 or 5 different chess games going on at once with different friends and stuff. But they just log in, take a turn once per day, have 3 or 4 different games going, and then go about the rest of their day and hop back in. Or if you want to mainline it for a couple hours, you can do that too.
Yep.
So so it's quite fun.
All right, so Carl's going to load us up here as we go into our future stream. Yeah, I remember when Play by Cloud used to be past the floppy around.
yes, back in the day.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what a floppy disk is,
It's the icon that the save is.
yeah,
when you
your
save thing,
icon, it was a physical object
it's
that
like
you used to...
the whole thing.
Go ask your dad. He can tell you about it. So, couple of other questions people have had through here. How do you know when it's time to recommission a nuclear power plant? It's a good question. We'll touch a little bit on the power system today, but...
so to back up a little bit, there are 3 different types of power plants. The nuclear power plant is by far the most efficient. It's the most technologically advanced, but comes with this risk of nuclear fallout. So there is a project to recommission the nuclear reactor in your production list. And on the tooltip for that project, I believe, is where it says, this is the age of the reactor. And the longer you go with that reactor without recommissioning it, the higher the chance gets for something to go wrong. So there's some descriptive details in when you're on the production for the city, choosing what to make next. It'll clue you into like, oh, okay, like this is how long maybe I can risk it and not do it this time. Maybe I should go ahead and recommission it now. So that's where that information lives.
Very cool.
Okay. All right, so here we are. It is the future. As we can see, Phoenicia is now a big purple blob that's spread out all over the world's coastlands.
Tyrian purple blob, yes.
Giant
It looks like
purple
he
blob.
does have flood barriers as well, so
Yeah.
he actually thought ahead to that.
And that's our glorious capital of Gadir up in the north there. Tyre is no longer our capital because we
Yeah,
moved it.
because he's moved it a couple of times. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, so to kind of give a brief geopolitical history here. So what Carl did was we had the Tyre capital from earlier in the game. We successfully held off Rome and all that sort of stuff. We settled quite well here. And then we went over to this other continent over to the east. And we set up our second capital of Carthage. We built a Carthon, we moved it over there. And so with that foothold, it helps that we also had a bunch of city-states nearby which don't have a lot of loyalty pressure. We set up a foothold, had locked loyalty, all that stuff. We snuck in on the other coast of that continent as well with these cities.
Yep.
And so even though our capital is no longer on this continent, Carl built the Statue of Liberty, which has a very similar effect. It's just in a local range.
Historically accurate, too.
Yep.
Totally historically accurate. Yep. So it will. So for those of you who can't read the description behind our picture-in-picture there, what the Statue of Liberty does is within 6
There we go.
tiles. Thank you. Within 6 tiles, it basically locks you at full loyalty. So our city there, as well as the one to the north, is at full loyalty, even though it's surrounded by, a lot of looks like Swedish cities there.
And the Swedes probably aren't real happy with us for settling up the coast quite as hard as we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll touch base on one other new thing while we've got here. We've got a lot of cities spread across the map. We've got a lot of civilizations.
Yeah.
But we do want to point out one other report that I think will make a lot of people happy. Everybody knows the joys in Civ of clicking on everybody's leader and then going into the deal table to see if they actually have what they want to
Do you
trade
have
for.
spices? Do you have spices?
Right.
Who's got iron? Does
So-
anybody have iron?
We've been working on a new report that we can put in, and we'll have Carl navigate over to the resource report. So gloriously, now you'll be able to see the basic resources that everybody has, just for things that are exposed on the deal table already. And then if you see something you need, you just click on them, go right into the trade menu then, and have your trade away. But I think this will be a popular addition that a lot of people have been asking for.
Especially with the accumulating strategic resources now, you can kind of see at a glance, like, ooh, Rome's got a lot of iron, I better watch out, and stuff like that. Or, hey, Rome's got a lot of iron, let me make a trade with them because we're friends.
Right.
Yep.
It's when Rome suddenly stops having a lot of iron, then you have to.
Where did it go?
Where do you go? Yeah,
Definitely helps with late game management though.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, so so Carl has brought us back to, so the third capital that Carl settled is up towards the north, and if you open up the continent lens, it is actually on a different continent now.
Yes.
So because of that, so our cities up on the coast there have full 100% loyalty with our Carthage, with our Phoenicia bonus. But something else that's really clever that Carl's done, which is a really neat Phoenician strategy, is that there are a lot of bonuses in the game that are keyed off of cities that are not on your home continent. And so what he's done by moving his capital to a fairly remote continent that he doesn't have a lot of cities on, is he has social policies like the colonial offices and colonial taxes, which are giving a whole bunch of economic bonuses to our like non-home continent colony cities,
Right.
which are actually kind of like our core powerful cities from earlier in the game. And I think he also has the Casa de Contracion wonder, which is stacking some bonuses there as well.
Yep.
So he's basically, set up a really powerful empire, moved his capital out into the hinterlands, but by doing so has beefed up the rest of his empire. So that's a really cool combination that he's got going on.
And there you can see some cool stuff too. You can see the modern Kothon. You
Yeah.
can see the flood barriers that are set up around the low
Yeah.
tiles. You can see
There's
the
the
Golden
Golden
Gate Bridge. He has an
Very
excellent
good.
spot for the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, that's a really cool bay that he's. That's the San Francisco Bay, but Phoenician version.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got a really good empire going here. And he's got a lot of alliances as well. So, time has passed. Trajan and us, we're cool now. So we got an economic alliance and things are good. he's got a very strong economy. You look at the 1,700 gold per turn from all these crazy trade routes. He's got 27 trade routes going. As I believe I mentioned in one of the previous streams, one of the changes we made to trade routes in Gathering Storm is that if they go over things that help them, that in the fiction of the game, travel faster. So going over ocean, going over the Golden Gate Bridge, going over canal districts, going over mountain tunnels or railroads, they get this sort of transportation gold bonus. So international trade routes get up to almost double the gold that they would normally get. So by having this multi-continent empire and having a bunch of trade routes from our Phoenicia bonuses, we're able to get a bunch of gold per turn. And if it's set up like this, can even outcompete Mali and their powerful trade route bonuses.
Yeah, he had to work a little harder than the Mali to get there,
Yeah.
but it's another one of those things. If you spend time with Phoenicia, you're going to unlock an incredible amount of power by really digging deep into their mechanics and really layering all the different options that you have available to you.
Yeah.
All right. So we are going to take a look at some of the different options you have available for you for these new governments.
Yeah.
So we've added an entire new government system, these tier 4 governments.
Yeah, so Carl is on the cusp of the tier 4 governments, the most powerful governments in the game, and here they are. So we have synthetic technocracy, we have corporate libertarianism, and digital democracy. And these are sort of like a combination of, touchstones in history and current events that we see like, oh, this could be an interesting direction for government, political science to evolve in, plus some cool science fiction elements. So each of them has 9 policy card slots, and 5 of those in each of them are wild card. So that's really significant. That gives you a lot more flexibility because, your legacy cards from previous governments have to be in a wild card slot. Once you get further into the future era of the civics tree, there are really powerful social policies that help you either go for a certain victory or push down someone else going for a certain victory. Those are also wildcard policy slots. So this basically is your setup for your run to whatever victory you want. And the way that they're different is that they have a particular inbuilt strength towards one victory type and weakness for another victory type. So synthetic technocracy, for example, you get 3 power for free in all of your cities and 30% production towards all city projects. And as I'll explain a little bit later, that sets you up really well for the new science victory. But you get minus 10% tourism, so you're not as good at the culture victory.
So while our AI overlords may make it really good at keeping the lights on, nobody wants to visit them because it's creepy to have targeted ads shown up at you all the time.
So the designers and Pete as well as our writer had a lot of fun dreaming up kind of what these governments would mean. So do you want to go into like a bit about like what synthetic technocracy kind of means for you?
Sure. And actually somebody had asked a question earlier about where do we get some of the ideas for things like quotes and the text and civics in it. And in this case, we were kind of like projecting ahead and going, based on what we see now in the world, what could the future potentially hold? So synthetic technocracy is a government by specialists. A synthetic technocracy would be one where potentially an AI would be involved with that too. Corporate libertarianism is generally this idea that, economic entities, whether they be people or corporations, are kind of the basis of the governance for it. And a digital democracy is something that's like upvote for president. No, it's where you have a much more direct system of government where people are, instead of going through mediated bodies, there's a lot of kind of like quick polling of the populace. And
it kind of goes back to like a very early, like I think even Plato talked about like a very direct democracy where, whereas a lot of, bigger nations today have more representative democracies. It's like, okay, well, let's vote for a congressman and then a congressman will vote for this thing. The idea of a direct democracy or digital democracy, if it was enabled by technology, is like, okay, like here's this law, and assuming everybody was educated enough to make a guess, it's like, okay, like yes or no or whatever, and like it's just all very seamless and there's no problems with it at all.
And because this is Civ, when you do it, it's totally utopian, and when your enemies do it, it's totally dystopian.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it with that for the time being.
Yeah. So then Carl's going for optimization imperative, which will give us you're going for corporate libertarianism. Or, there are a couple different ones. Carl is going, so as we mentioned earlier, Phoenicia's well set up, especially with the way that Carl's done this, to have a very strong economy. And he's going for a science victory, which the synthetic technocracy will help us with. And we are one turn away from our first step in it.
And when we do that, we'll take a look at how the science victory has changed as well, too.
Yeah, sounds good.
I like there's one Ottoman bombard.
What is he doing there?
It's a goodwill tour.
Yeah. He's moving. What is it? What is it doing?
It's just driving around, man.
Yeah.
Driving around.
Needs
We have
service.
mechanized infantry. What do you think you're doing?
The garage is the whole way over in like Rihanna or something. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Got a bad wheel.
Maybe he's going for Molly over there, and he's just going through some open borders. He's got a grudge.
All right, here we go.
There's our Earth Saddle. So the science victory. So we knew with Gathering Storm that we wanted to add a future era to the game.
Right.
Extend the game a little bit, have some really cool kind of science fiction technologies and governments, as we just said. And we wanted to revisit the victories as well. So with the culture victory, we have the rock band. With the domination victory, we have the giant death robot. And with the science victory, it sort of extends out and goes further into the future of what that would actually mean. So as before, you're going to launch an Earth satellite and land on the moon. But the third step is now this sort of combined, from the nanotechnology tech, you establish a Martian colony. So in the base game and in Rise and Fall, there were 3 parts to this. There's the hydroponics, the reactor, the 3 different things, and you'd have to launch them all separately. It was pretty expensive production-wise. Now we've kind of collapsed those into basically just one project, establish a Martian colony. Once you've done that, you keep going into the future era, and what you do as the final capstone is what's called an exoplanet expedition.
Right.
You go beyond Earth, if you will, to find
See
a
what you did there.
planet out in the stars, a nearby star system like Alpha Centauri or something like that, and you find you found a habitable planet, and you send it there, and it travels at 1 light year per turn. So this is kind of a throwback to actually the science victory as it was in older Civilization games like Civilization 1, where you launched a spaceship and it took time to arrive, and once it arrived, you won. But what we've done instead is, it's not a done deal once you launch the spaceship. You can launch it, it's great, but on standard game speed, you need to travel 50 light years in order to reach the exoplanet. 1 light year per turn, it's going the speed of light, which, is fast, but, it could be faster. So you use your other science fiction inventions to speed it along and get you that victory faster. So there are a couple different ways to do that. One of the coolest is you can help build the International Space Station with the World Congress.
And that is a project that you do through the world.
Yeah,
Congress.
so much like we have the World's Fair going on right now, we could decide to use our favor and vote to say, hey, let's build the International Space Station. And whoever trains astronauts with their project and kind of contributes the most points to that, whoever wins gets 3 extra light years per turn faster. So it's, if you just had the exoplanet expedition, it quadrupled the speed of it. So it'll help you win much faster. Now, it only does that if you've actually launched it. So if you win it, but you don't have your expedition out there yet, it won't be active until you do.
Right.
But, it's a really strong accelerator towards that victory. The other 2 options you have are sort of what the synthetic technocracy kind of plays into. So the idea behind the exoplanet expedition is you have this spaceship and it sort of has this solar sail, it's traveling the speed of light. And it has a certain, velocity of its own, but it doesn't have infinite fuel or anything like that. So what you can do, there's actually a science fiction book that I read that sort of inspired this. You can have lasers, giant lasers, situated on the planet to kind of shoot at the exoplanet spaceship, not to blow it up, but to speed it up.
But to gently on the
kinda-
sail to
just
move
kinda-
along. Yeah.
Go faster.
Not because
So
of their fear of lasers.
no, lasers are
Lasers
good.
are friends.
Lasers are our friends.
Yeah.
So there are 2 different lasers you can build, and they're both city projects. The first one is called a terrestrial laser. So that's basically you put a laser kind of on the ground and you shoot it. In order to accomplish that, you need a lot of power in your cities.
Right.
So you need to have either really good power plants or a lot of renewable energy. The second option is, okay, well, let's launch a laser sort of space station at a Lagrange point in Earth's orbit. And that has some solar panels, it's built in, it has its own power and it shoots from space, but you need to build the thing and get it up there. So it costs 30 aluminum to get up there.
Which is a lot of aluminum.
It's quite a bit. So you have this trade-off of okay, well, if you're going for a science victory, you could wait it out if nobody's competing for you in the late game and just wait the 50 turns on standard speed. That's usually not going to be enough. Or you could say, hey, I'm strong in diplomacy. Let me get the International Space Station. Or you could say, like, hey, I got a lot of strategic resources. Let me build the orbital space lasers. Or I could say, hey, I got a lot of power plants, got a lot of oil and I don't care about the climate or whatever, if you're a meanie head, and just, build terrestrial lasers and power it that way. So
Right.
those are the ways to kind of like accelerate you towards the end of the game to win the new science victory.
Very cool. And just real quick, after the Sydney Opera House finishes here, we'll just get Carl to bring up the progress tracker so you can see how that's going to be laid out now.
Right on.
Oop.
We got our optimization imperative complete as well.
Very good. So
we're in the lead on science.
Science. We can see, yep, we are moving along.
Yep. Cool. So we're launching our moon landing, and yeah, once you launch the expedition, you'll be able to see like how many light years do I have left, how many am I getting per turn, that sort of thing. So you couldn't get into a tense situation where it's like, oh, two different players have expeditions on their way, and it's all about who can fire more lasers.
Yeah, finish it off faster.
Yeah.
I see what he did there. He called it Carl Fitch.
Carl Fitch.
Okay. So
Nice.
speaking of, after Carl chooses a tech, he's going to go for Seastead, so potentially build the Seastead improvement. Which would
So this
be
is one of our first future era technologies. So going to let us build the Seastead improvement out on the water, which gives us more housing. It's a nice use for those sea tiles.
Yep.
And it gives us just an automatic diplomatic victory point.
But is it good for Bitcoin?
I don't know if it's
Okay.
good for Bitcoin. Yeah.
So speaking of diplomacy, there are two diplomatic instances going on right now, which are fairly interesting.
Right.
So we got World's Fair, which is getting ready to finish up. So we'll drop our picture-in-picture away so you can see the full piece there.
So at the gold tier, can I get the picture-in-picture going?
There we go.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So whoever comes in the highest place gets a bunch of great people points for free, which is great. And then silver tier, we get diplomatic favor, and then some less cool stuff if you're down at the bottom.
Civic boost. Yay.
So another advantage of Carl going really wide here and having a really strong economy is that he is just rolling on the great people points. He has a bunch of different buildings and a bunch of different districts all across the map. So the competition here is for, much like the historical World's Fair, it's like getting a bunch of smart minds together and seeing all these cool inventions and kind of like seeing who wins awards and stuff like that. So Carl's scientists and inventors are clearly in the lead here, so it'll probably work out well for us.
Now, the other one is kind of interesting because it is an emergency. It's an aid request that we are the target of.
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. So in this case, we had like a natural disaster or something that happened to us, and we said, hey, like world, we need help. We had a flood or something like that. So come to us and give us gold, or complete these aid projects for us. So it's kind of like a nice economic boost for us. The story being like, help us rebuild after this natural disaster happened.
Yep.
The bonus for other players who are involved, right now it looks like Suleiman is the leader, is that they get a diplomatic victory point. So we have to be careful, like if someone else is on the cusp of a diplomatic victory, we don't want to
you don't want to hand them
But in this case, it's like, yeah, cool, it'll be fine. And, there's diplomatic favor that they can get from it as well.
So this whole time, Carl's standing next to his vault, trying to keep the door closed while the gold's spilling out, while holding out his hand to the other two
Hey guys,
civilizations,
go borrow some money.
We're really having trouble
hurting
here.
Because I got 27 trade routes and 1,700 gold a turn.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to track power?
There is, yeah. So, yeah, this might be a good time to talk about the power system. So, on the city banners here, here's an example of a city that is not doing so well on the power. So, as I mentioned in a previous stream, but power is basically a way to supercharge your more advanced buildings later in the game.
So it's not anything that's going to punish you necessarily if you don't have enough of it.
No. If we open up if we click on that guy right there, what we see is there's the power panel. And here we kind of get a readout of what all this means. So this city, because it has a research lab, requires 3 power. So the research lab, like if we hop on over to the buildings tab, like the research lab has a different effect. Down on the research lab, we see, okay, it gives us 3 science, but it gives us another 5 if the city's powered.
Right.
So this is kind of like how a lot of the late game buildings are now, where they have a baseline bonus that's okay, but it will be much better as long as we can keep that power going. So back on the city power panel, we'll see, okay, we need 3 power for this city to be fully powered, and we don't have any right now. So any of the buildings, like the research lab, that require power are temporarily less effective. So it's not really a penalty, but it's sort of like a missed opportunity. And the little advisor there is telling us, okay, well, we can build a power plant nearby to use resources to help us meet that need. We can build the dam and put a hydroelectric dam on that. We can build some renewable green energy, and with the future tech, we're getting more and more of those. So we have a builder ready to go here to build a solar panel to help us with that need. I think the solar panel will give us 2 power, so it won't be quite enough to meet the power need, but it's well on our way, and we can make another one next turn.
And it'll give us some gold and some production as well too.
Yeah. So they're not bad improvements to have. They give you a little bit of a bonus, but it's not going to be as good as something like a mine. But on a tundra tile, yeah, it's great, especially if the city needs power. If there's a city that has enough power, we might also. Oh yeah, we're working on Edmondson Scott there as well for that wonder bonus. Is there a city that has adequate, like Anyuk over there, we might be able to see kind of what the power panel looks like for a city that has enough power. So here's a good example. So we have a research lab and a broadcast center here. Both of them require 3 power, but in this case, we're meeting it. So what's happening is Tyre has an oil power plant, and it's using that oil to generate power and sending it to our city of Aynuk. So it's meeting that need of 6.
Right.
So this is where the sort of the advantage comes from power plants. It uses resources, it contributes CO2 to the global climate, but you're able to get these regional effects for power, and it's very sort of efficient. Whereas the solar panels and stuff, you need to kind of go and build, and they take up tiles, and they're not. Most of them aren't available till later in the game.
Much later. I mean, yeah. They're
Hydroelectric dam is early on. That's probably the earliest one. But yeah, solar panel, wind farm are later. Offshore wind farm is in the future era, and that's quite nice because it's out in the ocean. And there's a hydroelectric dam that Carl has built there. So that's giving some power, I think probably to Byblos, yeah. Or
probably Tyre as well too. So
yeah, so yeah, that's kind of a brief.
Do you want to answer some random questions that have come through from chat? There's somebody who's been asking very nicely if the changes to England are going to apply to Rise and Fall and base Civilization 6 as well.
So they are not, because part of England's new Workshop of the World ability is related to the power system. Okay. And the power system is only in Gathering Storm.
Okay. As the game advances and CO2 increases, do you see ice disappear from the map? Yes, you can see the polar ice start to disappear, which is sort of an interesting way to get access to the north of it.
And that's been balanced interestingly too. We actually are adding more ice than we typically wouldn't have because we wanted to start blocking off some of those passages early in the game that were typically balanced to kind of let you go through, because we want that to be a gameplay effect. We want that to be a thing where, do you want that ice to disappear? Do you want those passages open? Do you want to really pay attention to the rising sea levels or not? So there's, like everything else in this particular expansion, there's going to be pros and cons to everything that's happening in the game.
Real quick aside, so Carl's just finished up our synthetic technocracy adoption, and with the 5 wildcard policy slots, he's able to slot in, if he wants to, basically all of our legacy wildcard slots, which is really cool.
That is pretty cool. Somebody wanted to know how Carl got 27 trade routes in the course of the game.
I think part of it is from the Kothons. He's got so many coastal cities, and he's building, the buildings in the Kothons. So that's part of it. Another part of it is from Phoenicia's bonus, because I believe the government plaza at base, as well as every building that you put in it, so up to 4, will give you another trade route. So that's another 4. So I think it's mostly that. And I think Carl has 21 cities in this save. So there's quite a lot of Kothons.
Which is why he was using the production manager rather than going into individual cities.
Right, he's
and
got the Colossus as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's really been stacking the trade route bonuses. And he got a great person, probably a great merchant earlier, that gave him another capacity as well.
Somebody's asking if there will be new victory or defeat movies. There is a new victory movie for the diplomatic victory.
There is.
So that is, you'll want to get that, so you get to see what that's. So that, in a nutshell, is your very flexible, very useful Phoenicia. Cool civ, interesting historically, interesting to see them brought into the future. That's going to be fun to do. So, thank you very much for tuning into our live stream this afternoon. We appreciate you guys checking this out. We've got lots of people putting up content today about Civilization 6 Gathering Storm. Make sure you check that out as well, too. And we're coming out on February 14th, just about 2 weeks away. So very exciting. But we appreciate you coming and watching our stream today. Keep tuned to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, MySpace,
All the
the other
internets.
places that we have Civilization presence. And we'll see you for our next Civilization live stream. Have a great day.